This is Greg Laurie of A New Beginning, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, can a credit card company decrease your credit limit? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you do have a question, have a comment, there are a couple of ways to handle that at the website. The first way is through the email system, and we've been doing that for decades, taking in many emails, answering questions, and most of the time that takes care of the question and answer situation. Then there's times where the situation is a little bit more complicated, needs more detail. We have opened up some different blocks of time which you can sign up for online, and we can schedule a telephone call and talk through it a little bit more detailed. And that's something I've just made available this year, and real excited about it, because what we want to make Prudent Money is a way that you can go get good information and make good financial stewards of what God has given you to manage. So that's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, you know, so many people depend upon debt and credit to pay for Christmas. And of course, I think we're going to see even more so this year just because of the trends in credit card spending and credit limits and creation of debt. And could not be a more bad idea from a financial standpoint than to go into debt for Christmas. Unless, and I'll give you this, unless you know exactly the amount of money you're going to spend and it's a short-term deal and you know that there's money coming in and you can pay it all off within maybe a couple of months or something like that. I'm not one that says, you know, don't ever use debt or credit or anything like that. I mean, if you use it responsibly. I think that, that's what it's there for. But just make sure you're not, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but make sure that you're not using credit irresponsibly by just hoping that there's a way to pay it back. And what ends up happening is that hope turns into debt that you've accumulated from last year's Christmas, which is what you don't want to do. So the plan is to be intentional about paying it back before next year, or hopefully before next year, or even sooner than that. But could the credit card company decide to change the game? And this is an interesting thing that we're starting to see. We saw this. You typically see credit card companies start to react when risk starts to rise and potential defaults start to rise. And this is what they look at real carefully. And I think that this is going to have more of an impact on credit card companies because their blasted interest rates are record highs. And the realization is that when you get locked in at 30%, or 28% or 25%, it is almost impossible to get out of debt. And that's when defaults end up happening. But they do have the right to change the game. And we give them that right. When you sign up for a credit card, you sign on the dotted line that you are aware that they can make any changes that they want to make to a contract. This is the worst consumer contract you'll ever sign up for in your life, is a credit card application. My youngest yesterday, or a couple of days ago, got home from the University of Arkansas, where he's a freshman, and Grayson was all excited because he got his first credit card in the mail. And last night he went out and bought something, and of course I've had very long talks with him about how you deal with that and how you pay it off immediately. And trying to make sure that he knows all the ins and outs of how that works. But credit makes the world go round, unfortunately, and it's something, if used responsibly, can work out great. But what do you do when the credit card company says, well, you know what? Sorry, Mr. Smith, we're going to cut your credit line from 30,000 down to 5 or down to 10 or down to 20,000. And they end up cutting your credit to the point to where, let's say that you have $25,000 worth of credit card debt, and they cut it down to 27,000, pretty much eliminating any space that you have for a credit line. And that's it's really an unfortunate thing. I think that, well, I'll say this. I mean, I get it. Credit card companies are taking a risk by issuing unsecured debt. I mean, there's nothing, the debt is not tied to a car or a home or an asset. So if you decide not to pay it back, well, that's the risk that they take. Therefore, they can charge higher rates of interest based on the risks that they're taking. Now, one could argue that at what point do they reward themselves greater than they need to from the standpoint of raising interest rates so high? I would argue that they are way beyond that and just taking advantage of the situation. But it's one of those things where you start to see the shift in the economy, and they start to lower credit rates, credit limits. They'll, in some instances, they may even shut down a credit card. And I think this time around, it's going to be really interesting to what the steps they do take, just because of the greed factor of credit card companies and how they've gone about raising those credit card interest rates so blasted high. So this is one of the reasons what we want to start talking about, having some good conversations on, is how to get rid of these credit cards once and for all. If you're in a situation where you have a ton of credit card debt, you know the feeling. And it's one of those things where you just want to be free of it. And boy, there's not a greater feeling. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But credit card companies, it's ideally, if you're going to do this to a consumer, then do it prior to December 1st. Don't do it right in the middle of Christmas shopping season. But it's just something to keep an eye on. If you are limiting and leaning into a little bit of more credit card debt than you normally do, of course that's your choice. Doesn't have a good, oftentimes doesn't have a good outlook as far as the way the economy is going and that kind of thing. But you got to be, you just have to make good decisions when it comes to credit cards, because the game can change, and that's a bad situation. I remember back when President Obama was elected, one of the first major pieces of consumer legislation he signed into law was the Card Act. And this piece of legislation was designed to get rid of the corrupt nature of credit card contracts. Of course, it did nothing of the sort. In my book, Deceptive Money, I talked at length about what a political grab this was, because basically what they did, they said, okay, this is the way the credit card model is going to look in the future. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. But we're going to give you 18 months to get ready for the new credit card model that we have proposed in this legislation, which greatly, supposedly, reduces what they can get away with. And if you look back at it now, it didn't really do much at all. But they had 18 months to make these changes, and they slashed cards, credit limits. They raised interest rates. They basically got their portfolio of credit card debt into the most prosperous form it could be. I mean, let's say that you're getting 15% in return on your credit card debt as a credit card company, and you decide to raise it 21, 22%. That's just an automatic bump of profitability. So, the bottom line, and I say this all throughout the book of Deceptive Money, is that credit card companies are not there to be your friends. They're there to make money, and they are there. The greed factor is alive and well. So, Wallet Hub they do a lot of great surveys and a lot of great studies throughout the year, and they had a study they did on credit limits. What states saw the biggest credit limits reduced, and what saw the least. And Texas was somewhere in the middle, which it typically is. But one of their analysts had something to say that I thought was just was so timely. It says a credit limit decrease can pose a challenge by making daily purchases less convenient, disrupting your cash flow, increasing your credit utilization, and hurting your credit score. But it may also be an opportunity to improve your financial habits. Embracing this opportunity for greater fiscal responsibility involves careful budgeting and timely bill payments. By actively managing your finances within the revised limits, you can not only mitigate the short-term effects on your credit score, but also cultivate healthier financial habits for long-term stability. There's a lot of truth to. I thought it was very well spoken and made a lot of sense. It's one of those situations where you are forced to make changes versus by the credit card company doing it for you by taking away the ability to charge versus you making your own choices to not charge. Now, one of a lot of this advice about credit cards and debt, and it comes from a place where they just assume that you can all of a sudden do it. I think it's something that you have to really work on and stay very committed to it. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today and how all that works. But a big difference, though, when you choose outright to make those choices of, hey, I'm not going to use credit anymore. I'm going to go without. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like on the other side of the break. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
In 1 Corinthians, Paul reminds us to run the race of life to win the prize. Join me, Dr. Erwin Lutzer, for Running to Win. Be strengthened to finish your race with confidence.
Weekday mornings at 8 o'clock here on KDKR.
Hello, I'm John Monroe, and Thursday on The Verdict, we're reaching the end of our study on why grace is so amazing. For Christ followers, having a better understanding of God's grace helps us to better understand our salvation and live a life of grace, displaying the love and truth of our Lord Jesus Christ. Join us Thursday on The Verdict.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I was talking about credit card companies and forcing a change in your life versus you saying, you know what, I'm going to change. I'm going to make the steps that I have to make. Because here's the thing that you've got to realize, and this is no big aha moment or anything, and something that you probably already realize, but you can't make a change with a set of habits that created the problem in the first place. Let's say it again. You can't make a change with the same set of habits that created the problem in the first place. You have to change your habits. And I know that personally, dealing with my own finances, there's habits that I wish I were better at. Then the reality is maybe I'm just not, maybe probably, I'm just not as committed as I should be. And I would encourage you, as you start to look into the new year, to think about forcing some of these change, to intentionally change, not being forced to do so, but make yourself do these changes, because it stinks at first. It's hard at first, and it's one of those things, like with any habit that you want to change. It requires a lot of willpower to get from point A to point B, and then you start to see things get easier and get to see things easier. I was watching Shark Tank last night, and that's the show with Mark Cuban and several other very rich and wealthy people, and they decide whether people come and pitch their ideas and their businesses, and they decide whether they want to invest into it or not. And so this company came up with a cold plunge. It's where you get into a bathtub that the temperature is 35, 40, 45 degrees, and you jump into that tub first thing in the morning. I know it sounds crazy, right? But there's great health benefits to it. Anyway, you jump in there, and it's just excruciatingly cold, and you only stand there for a couple of minutes. So they were pitching their model of what a bath plunge unit looks like. So Robert, one of the sharks, decides he's going to do it, and he gets in there and he fights it, and he's screaming, it's so cold, and the guy's saying, just breathe and breathe and breathe. And he goes, you start to get used to things when you take a step and you settle yourself down and you breathe. The same thing I would say is just like when you decide to change your ways and change your habits about credit card debt, and change and do things differently. It's cold, like the cold plunge. It's painful. I'm sure that's pretty painful at the beginning. But what I would encourage you to do is to take that and pray about it. Take a deep breath, because here's the reality of the situation. You will not get through this to the other side, which there's a huge reward on the other side, without God's grace and God's assistance and God's ability to open doors for you. It just won't happen. Maybe it happens. Maybe you get lucky. But it's something that this is a stewardship issue, and God wants to take you on a learning adventure, because when you get to the other side and you realize, hey, things are looking better, things are looking up, I'm able to make some headway, it is one of the greatest feelings that you can have from a financial standpoint, and it's empowering. And it's just something I pray for everybody, that as we look forward, because I do believe that there's going to be some tough aspects about this economy next year, and it's not too late to start. Not too late to start. So if you have any questions, once again, you know the drill. Go to prudentmoney.com and send them in one of two ways: either book some online time with me at no cost, of course, or just send me an email. We'll get you taken care of that way. Dear Bob, I currently have $8,000 in credit card debt and looking for a way to lower my interest rates. I had a company say they could help me do that. What are my options? Well, great question, and it brings about a lot of things to consider, because number one, credit card companies are very hesitant today to deal in big numbers. If they're doing anything at all, it's about reducing risk, not increasing risk. So the chances of you getting a opportunity in the mail to do a balance transfer of an amount below 10 grand, I think is pretty good. I don't have anything to back this up. This is purely speculative, but it's just based on observation. There's kind of that sweet spot in the credit and debt world that, $10,000 brought over, that's good for the portfolio. bringing $20,000 or $25,000 over is not. We don't want to take that much risk. But eight grand, you should be getting offers in the mail to transfer and get 0%. I would advise you to look at it from the standpoint of this may not be the best idea. And what's interesting is you look at it and go, well, it's 0% for 18 months, 12 months. Why wouldn't that be a good deal? Because it's on the other side of the interest-free period that we're concerned about. It's that period where the interest rates goes from 0 to what? To whatever. And these contracts are horrible consumer contracts and give a lot of control to the credit card company. So what you might find yourself in a situation is that your credit card interest rate may end up 12 months later being much higher than it is today. That's what you want to be careful about. So I'd be very hesitant to move my money to a 0% right now, just because it may end up being a lot higher. So that's the first thing that you that you're probably being presented with, thinking about, considering. Why wouldn't I want to do that? The second one are these personal lending sites. LendingTree.com, they're all these different sites where you can get a personal loan. They do look at a lot of your financials and could be a good place to get a loan. Interest rates will be high, but they may not be as high as what you're paying now, which makes it worth to go and check out, because you can get a check without them doing a hard push on your credit and that showing up and dinging your credit score, just to get the initial credit, your credit score to get you qualified. Now, ultimately, they do ding your credit because they have to do a hard check. But the personal lending site's definitely something you could look into. Like I said, it's not ideal, but and by the way, a personal loan, which you have a set dollar amount that you pay over a set number of months, looks better. Looks better on your credit score, and scores better than an open line of credit. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So by taking, let's say, $15,000 from a credit card and paying it off with a personal loan with a lower interest rate, still could be at 19 or 20%. You're increasing your credit score by the type of debt you're using. Plus, you opened up all this empty credit limit, and if you keep that open, that's really good for your credit utilization rate, and that can increase your credit score as well. So there's some benefits of going these routes. A part-time job, maybe it's a situation where you look at your the amount that you owe and say, if I worked extra hours or got a part-time job for 6 months, 8 months, and said it's just a season, I'm going to get out of this once and for all, and commit yourself to it, it will go by so fast. I always marvel at how fast time goes by. That's also another idea. And then maybe one of the better ideas, I'll save it for last, one of the horrible ideas is to go to any one of these companies that says that they can do this for you, that they can lower your credit, they will do that. They can increase your credit score, lower the debt that you pay, and a settlement, and please stay away from these companies. And I wrote a whole chapter on the debt solutions business in my book, Deceptive Money, that talks about how much trouble that you can get into with these situations. So you want to be real careful not to do it as a blanket answer. Then last but not least, 401k loan. Now, this is one of those things that's always been a last resort. I'm unfortunately going to run out of time before I could say everything I want to say about this. But this is a situation where you could get a much lower interest rate. It's not ideal. Nothing's ideal when you're trying, but when you're talking about these high interest rates, trying to get them lowered, a 401k loan, if your 401k program does do it, has good potential to it. You just don't want to end up taking that 401k loan out for a very long period of time, because there can be consequences. I'll tell you what, we'll pick up on this and talk about this next time I have, when I don't have somebody coming on, which we do tomorrow. John Apollo is going to be on with us, and but we'll go over the ins and outs of 401k loans maybe on Monday of next week. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.